Hi, Dr. Greer. Good afternoon.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Pat, for joining me.
How are you?
Good. Swamped, busy. A big announcement to make for everyone.
Okay.
Now that we're in the middle of January and past the New Year and holidays, a couple of days before Christmas, the Congress passed and the president signed the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the funding bill for the Pentagon for the next year. In it is a clear provision for UFO whistleblowers and witnesses to come forward through a protected mechanism where they can legally share everything they know and any materials, documents, anything they have. And that is an enormous breakthrough. And so this whole YouTube today is about making a call and an appeal for courageous people to come forward, because now they're protected. They have a legal mechanism. There's no gray area. And it includes, importantly, which was not originally in the draft, which we wanted in, are contractors. So people who work for Lockheed Skunk Works, people who work for other defense contractors or tech contractors who are in the private sector. If it came through any government funding or contractor for the military intelligence community, as well as government military and intelligence employees or former employees, retired or current, they can now come forward fully protected for their non-disclosure agreements through this specific provision. So that is the first time in history that's been authorized. And I think that door is wide open right now, and we should walk through it with everything we can. So what I'd like for everyone listening to listen very carefully. The process for doing this, we have at our website, you can go to info@siriusdisclosure.com, SIRIUS disclosure.com. So info@siriusdisclosure.com, that will get to me. We will handle you very confidentially, as we have hundreds of these whistleblowers in the past 25 years. And what we're doing is taking people like that, we're going to do it soon with one, taking them over to the top people that are cleared word code word clearance, TSSA, top secret special compartmented information, to take them into a secure place and get their information so that the constitutional government of the United States that has been deceived on this and not been given information can find out and get to the bottom of the entire issue. So this is a major initiative. We want people to contact us soon. And I will handle those folks with very high level of confidentiality.
Great. Now, is this this is permanent, right? They can't walk this back at all, can they?
Well, of course, every Congress can write a bill that supersedes another one. Happens every day. Which, like I said, the door is open, wide open. Now, who knows in a year or two? So I think we should seize the day.
Right.
Okay.
It's very momentous.
It is. And a little history here. Over the last 30 years, from briefing the director of the CIA to meeting with members of the Senate and House, Pentagon, others, here and abroad, there was never a legal mechanism for any government to get to the bottom of this for people who had this level of clearance. And the people who courageously came forward with the Disclosure Project and the National Press Club event in 2001 did it based on a different mechanism. Now, both are in play. What was the first mechanism? The first mechanism is that we wrote in 1997, 25 years ago, what's called a UNOD letter, unless otherwise directed. And my military advisor said, hey, Dr. Greer, here's something that's done all the time. You write an assessment to the key agencies and the heads of various departments of the government that says, unless otherwise directed, this is our assessment of a situation. And our assessment was, by then, we could prove legally that these deep black projects running the UFO issue were unconstitutional and illegal, and were outside the oversight of the president, the CIA director I briefed, and senior members of the Congress I had met with, including back then members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who oversee all this, allegedly, but it worked. And we had also, through meetings, proven that the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and Admiral Wilson, the head of Intelligence Joint Staff, were also being denied access, being deceived, and threatened by this rogue, thuggish group. Based on that, we said, because of this, all national security oaths and non-disclosure agreements are null and void, because the underlying program that they've been in, even though they didn't know it, is being run outside the law, against the law itself. Now, from 1997 to now, no one in the US government has contradicted that assessment. And the way this works is, once it's sent and it was signed and receipted and sent back to us, if they don't intervene, I think we put 90 days on it, which would have been 25 years ago, early 1998, then you can proceed. This mechanism is very nicely done. And that's how I got the first group of disclosure witnesses, about 100 of them that you see in the disclosure book, and at the National Press Club, 20 of them were there. Well, those men and women were convinced that that was true, so they courageously came forward. Now we have that in place, plus an officially sanctioned law for people to come forward. So now there's no excuse. We have a door wide open. I've been working with the people who have been central to creating that. And I personally hand off the information and the personnel. So if someone comes to me, I will meet with them and then bring them to where they're then taken into a secure compartmented information facility, SCIF, or the vault. It's called the vault. And they can share everything. And the people they're speaking to have the highest clearance to receive everything. And these guys, a year on working with them, they're the real thing. They're honest, they're courageous, they're in the constitutional government, they respect the rule of law, and they're wanting to go the whole distance on it. So both key members of the government, Congress, the elected, but these people who are really the main investigators, they're all the real thing. Now, there's an office called AARO, AARO, that is also receiving testimony, but that would be after these key people are sure that they've documented the information, so that that office, the AARO office from the Pentagon, doesn't just bury their testimony. So we have a check and balance in place, watchdog. So that's what we want people to understand. And I will personally handle folks who have that information. Now, what we don't want, please don't slam us with conspiracy theories or rumors or fourth hand, I heard, da. But we do need to know if you yourself or someone you know is a firsthand person who may have been in a facility, worked on a project, been at a UFO event, reverse engineered ET craft, including documents, because this allows a mechanism for documentation that such whistleblowers may have to be brought in. And for that matter, material, if someone had actual physical material from a craft or what have you. So all of this mechanism is going. We think that we have really want to, in the next 6 months, get that process fully stood up. And it's very exciting, and people will be protected and people will be confidential. Now, eventually it'd be nice if some people who are willing would come publicly forward outside of this mechanism, because we're planning in late May, we haven't said it yet, to have another National Press Club event, sort of a bigger version of the Disclosure Project in 2001. But that is very much dependent on people's stomach for being publicly identified. You don't have to be publicly identified for what I'm talking about. You can be completely anonymous to the public, confidential, and provide the information. Excuse me. So that to me is a patriotic duty. I mean, if you have worked as a contractor or a government, military, or intelligence person, and you now know, as do some key people in the government, that there's been an extra legal, illegal, unconstitutional project managing this issue for, well, since at least the late 50s, that you now have a patriotic duty to come forward. Why? Because if we don't have the rule of law, and we don't have people coming forward with the courage to let the people we do elect and appoint, then we're back to the jungle. We're ceding this entire issue, and for really the future of the planet, to thugs and criminals. I'll be very blunt. That's what those groups are. And they know it, by the way. These guys in those groups know that they have been operating outside the law. And since I've been able to prove that since the late 90s, now it took me about 10 years to prove it. From early 90s to late 90s, I spent a lot of time meeting with people who, if this was being overseen properly, definitely would have known about it. The president's people, CIA director, people I named, those people, you cannot say that you're running a project legally when you are deceiving, lying to, and also embezzling over the years trillions of dollars that have gone into these reverse engineering programs and UFO related research projects without the knowledge and consent of the legally appointed and elected government of the United States. You cannot have it both ways. So that's the case. Now, most people, men and women who've been in these projects, they've sort of are, involved in one little area. They're not in the top of the management. They assume that it's being overseen. Every single disclosure witness I've had assumed when they were working the issue that through the chain of command and the legal constitutional system, that was being run properly. It was not. And that was the big discovery we made in the 90s. Now, interestingly, key people in the government now have discovered that is absolutely true. And so this is why we have, I think, a moral and ethical obligation to come forward, at least through this confidential mechanism, so that the people who are sincere, trying to get to the bottom of this on behalf of the US government and the people of the United States, do so. And I think that in the best case scenario, some of these that will come forward will actually come forward publicly for the public and the media. But that is not a requirement. I want to emphasize that's the ideal, but it's not required. No one needs to feel like they have to be publicly out there in order to contact us. So again, it's info@seriousdisclosure.com. So everyone, please post that on all your social media, link to this YouTube, and let people know that this is literally in 70 years, probably, well, not probably, definitely the biggest, has the most potential for ending this illegal secrecy and moving the subject forward and solving the problem. Because ultimately, if it isn't solved at a large level, peace in the world, the technologies that need to come out, everyone knows we're doing the Lost Century documentary about the technologies that have been kept secret for 100 years. And you can help support the crowdfunding there at thelostcenturyfilm.com. And that's planned. We're planning to have that come out in late May now. So I think that if all goes well, the tech platforms are now requiring like 120 days from the time you deliver it to the time it comes out. They've extended it by almost double recently. So, but we're looking at late May, hopefully. But the reason that's important is that then the public will be aware of what the stakes are, because it's not just the rule of law, which is big enough. It's what are they keeping secret? What's so important that they would do these illegal, unconstitutional actions? Well, it's the collusion and corruption between big industrial and financial interests and covert programs to protect financial interests and cartels. Because, hey, I always say, look at the tic tac. Look at how that UFO is moving. There's no oil on board. There's no rockets. There's no solid rockets. There's no nuclear power plant. It's an electromagnetic field propulsion. It's pulling energy from the fabric of the space-time around at 0 point, and it's moving. Now, those technologies applied to peaceful energy use would completely save the biosphere and end poverty on the planet within 20 years, maybe less. So this is a great consequence to the future of humanity and to our planet. And then on top of it, once this issue can get disclosed properly, there's a chance that leaders around the world will figure, whoa, we're not alone. Who's mining that store? Who's taking care of that relationship? Now, the CE5 contact community is doing this as citizen diplomats. But ultimately, leaders of the world need to look at this and realize that the worst case scenario is what's happening now. And that is criminally minded thugs who are in this military industrial illegal group are the ones firing at and damaging the potential relationship between humans and extraterrestrial civilizations. That's ultimately the biggest threat of all of this, even probably more dangerous immediately than the biosphere and the environment being damaged. Not all those issues have to be addressed. Is why we've been doing both the CE5 contact effort and the disclosure project and the work on these technologies for 30 years. But here's a mechanism that I ask people for their thoughts and prayers as we do this, because obviously it's some risk personally to myself, but I think that we have to move forward. Like I said, maybe in a year or two, they close that door. Somebody changes that law and closes it. You cannot guarantee it when you're dealing with politics. And in politics, it can also be corrupting influences. So right now, this is a huge achievement, big breakthrough, and we're asking for everyone's support.
Do you feel like more and more people in the American government are more and more of the lawmakers and politicians? Do you feel like they are beginning to understand this and learn about it? I mean, it's been a small group that you're working with, but do you feel like that's growing?
Excuse me. Oh, definitely. I mean, what I know, it's not what I think, it's what I know, is that enough information that we put together in the last year has been provided to key people, that now they're a dog with a bone. They're like, well, there's something here. And they want to get to the bottom of it. And I think for that to happen, they need more and more firsthand people. Remember, listen, everyone, all the conspiracy theories notwithstanding, I'm a retired emergency doctor. I've never gotten an Indian head nickel from a corporation or the government. I've never worked for anyone doing this. This has all been a volunteer effort. The entire disclosure project has been funded through donations and volunteers. But at the same time, we've collected so much information that we're now in possession of the largest intelligence archive in the world on this. And so that's the other thing we're working on. We need help here. And so here's a request number 2. We're working on putting together, finishing this archive in the next few months. And we hope it can be released and announced to the whole world at a National Press Club event in late May. Now, stuff sitting on a 10 terabyte hard drive doesn't help the world much. We need probably one of the best website designers who knows security in the world to help us build a website that is, I don't know, technology this way, blockchain or whatever, backed up, that can hold 5 to 10 terabytes. A huge amount of material, totally searchable, word searchable, that we would load into the internet so that everyone in the media and in governments around the world and the man on the street public would have access to everything we have, except names I need to protect. The only thing we're going to redact, in full disclosure, if someone's come to me and I have their information and they're wanting it to be kept, but just private or only conveyed to these key people in the government, I'm not going to ever violate that trust. So that will not be in there for people who just are, wanting salacious gossip. But because that is unethical. And as a medical doctor, we know how to keep a confidence. But everything else, documents, something like 119 retrieval cases of ET and some man-made UFOs we have. All the data on that, the where, the when, the location of all the facilities, how this is funded. This is going to be the biggest reference site in history for this subject. And to make that available to the public, two things: we're going to need funding for it. And secondly, we're going to need someone who technically knows how to do that, which, as you know, Pat, I can't even turn my wife turns my computer on for me. I'm sort of I'm an IT moron for sure, but we do need help with that. So if anyone knows someone who can do it either pro bono or inexpensively, because right now we don't have a budget for this. We're just doing it like even these people I'm moving into DC who are top secret guys, we're funding. The Disclosure Project is funding in all this because we want to be sure that this is handled very carefully. So that's another thing we need is people who can support this, the cost. I estimate in the next year we'll probably spend around $250,000 doing all this. But someone who can help, please help. But that's going to be a big task because to make a functional, safe, secure website with that much content, it's big.
Yeah.
A lot. It can be done. It can be done.
A question. When you were talking about other countries and other governments who are obviously watching this closely at this point, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Have they reached out? Or what do they have anything in place so that people in their country?
Excuse me, I'm getting over a little cold. Yes. Oh yeah. I mean, I know people who. Yes, people from Canada and other countries have reached out to me. The thing is that the United States is from a global economic and military and national security point of view, is like the 800-pound gorilla on the block. And I know years ago, I was meeting with a cabinet level person from Japan. And when I mentioned, I said, look, this is stalled out with the president. No one in Congress is pursuing this. Why doesn't your government take the lead on this? Because I'll give you guys everything too, because I don't have a security clearance. I can share what I have with anyone in the world. I've kept myself free of ever signing a non-disclosure agreement. So I'm a free agent. He turned white pale. He said, oh no, we can never get out ahead of the US on this, ever. We would never. And he was just like panicked with the idea of it. So I think that in reality, I mean, most Americans don't realize that the center of gravity on military intelligence, economic, financial is in the United States, whether we like it or not. Now, it doesn't mean, honestly, there could be other countries, and I've said this for years, that if there were other presidents or prime ministers or governments around the world that really wanted to get to the bottom of this, we hand off everything we have and they start pursuing it, they could actually advance this very far. But they'd have to do it. They're usually very afraid of stepping out ahead of what the US government's doing because of the power and intimidation of America. I hate to say it, but I mean, it's just geo-reality, geopolitics. So I would welcome that. If someone's got a very high contact, if someone wants to pursue it, I'll fly in, I'll do anything. You know, my whole mission is getting the truth out, resolving this problem. And by the way, let's move on to where we should have been in 1954 or something. You know, let's move this on, since, you know, we've frittered away a century here. But so that is something I welcome. But so far, there've been inquiries, but no one really wanted to take the bull by the horns and do it.
Do you think any of these other governments will sign bills and put out legislation like we have with this whistleblower, the NDAA?
We'll see. We'll see. I haven't heard anything. There's some talk in Canada of something somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
We'll see.
yeah. Too bad Paul Hellier's not still around.
Yes.
Wonderful man. Well, this is interesting. Just to be clear about this other one point, this AARO, this would not be the first stop for someone who wants to come forward, right?
No. They'd like it to be.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But we have a system in place above that and more, let's just say, I think that has much more credibility and power and dedication to the truth. I've worked with those people for a year, giving them a huge amount of information. Now, I think there are some good people in Arrow who would like to, but most of them have only been involved maybe 6 months. They know nothing about the subject. As you saw last spring during those hearings, there were Congress people who knew about the cases we had brought forward about the UFOs concern about our nuclear, like mine of North Dakota, in the disclosure book. And the guys in that office knew nothing about it. I mean, this was Office of Naval Intelligence guy, Bray, and his guys. So they really need help and guidance. But we're also concerned about the politics of those folks who are in the military end of it, to get pressure to get information and then bury it. I'm not saying that's what they're going to do, but these are facts, not in evidence, as a lawyer would say. So we have this system to be sure that can't happen, because these key people in the US government will know everything these whistleblowers are sharing just before they're handed over and given information over to Arrow. So and that's a very important check and balance, because we know what has happened in the past, where you set up an office, it becomes a storefront, sort of a dog and pony show, and stuff goes in, nothing ever comes out. So we want to be sure that doesn't happen this time.
Right. I think a lot of people who watched the televised those hearings, most of them, I think, thought that the men who were answering really knew, but were keeping it a secret. But what you're saying is really most of them don't know at all.
They didn't. They don't. It's sad. So one of the saddest things I learned 30 years ago in 93 was that some of these people, you think, oh, it's this person and that person, and they have an all access pass. They have top secret clearances and a very high position. They're not given any information. And unfortunately, that's the structure of this secrecy. It keeps them in the dark. So I have sympathy for that. But at the same time, I know historically, once someone starts going down this path, there's intimidation, there's threats, there's corruption, there's career threats, and things go sideways. Over the past year, I've found that this team that's really leading this and trying to get all this done have the most incredible integrity. I've been singularly impressed, and I'm not impressed easily by that kind of thing, frankly, because you know it's the fire test, and they've been under fire, and they're still fighting the good fight. So it's a very important initiative. Certainly in my 33 years of doing it, I have seen nothing this promising. And now that this law is enshrined, I recently had a man contact me who had been watching what we've been doing for over 20 years. Very code level, word code level, TSSCI, top secret special compartment intelligence, dealing with this issue. And he says, I was waiting for this moment, been waiting for a mechanism, a law that lets me do this. And that's happening. And actually, it's soon going to be handed off, that all that information and this person. So it's I think people out there need to share this information and our info at seriousdisclosure.com with everyone, because you never know. It's 6 degrees of separation, right? Someone you know that knows someone else that knows someone else. Boom, there's someone who worked at Raytheon, or someone who worked at Nellis, or Wright Patterson, Edwards. They're all over the place.
Right.
Now it's time for them to come together. Come together.
What happens after these groups gather this intelligence that's about these covert operations? What happens then?
Excuse me. Here's what I think. It's impossible to predict. Great question. Ultimately, what will the National Security Council, the president, and the leaders in the Congress do? Because that's where the buck stops, right there. Right? It stops there, because that's the constitutional elected and appointed government. And that has to do with their understanding and their courage and vision. So they need to understand the issues, which they don't fully yet. And they have to have the courage to do the right thing in the face of enormous pressure not to. So this gets into the whole question, the issue, I said this decades ago. This all comes down to someone's courage to do the right thing, whether it benefits you selfishly and personally or politically or financially or not. And that's a tough thing for humans, obviously, but it has to do with values and integrity and courage. And so that's hard to predict. Now, the backstop is what we're doing, the Disclosure Project, because I know who everyone is and I know what everyone knows. And we'll see at the end of May who's been naughty and nice. And depending on how things go, it'll depend, that will drive how much I disclose and don't disclose. If there's no forward momentum or some corrupt interest stops this, the world's going to be in for an enormous shock. Yeah, yeah. Then the whole, the full Monty happens. But, my hope is that, now, I think this is a process of a year or two. I mean, that first of all, if you're starting with almost no information, except what you Googled on the internet, 90% of which is rubbish, what are you going to do? So what if you're the chairman of a key committee? If you've been denied information, you have been not read into or briefed on it, then you've got to learn all the way back from the 40s to now. You have to learn what they have, where they have it, why it's been kept secret, how it's been kept secret, how have they gotten the money. And we're doing all that in this intelligence archive that we're handing off, because without that, it makes no sense. How could a clandestine operation be running off the radar since the 50s? But it has. But see, that statement right there takes months when I've worked with these folks for them to get their mind around that level of manipulation, machinations, corruption. And most people, unfortunately, don't think that level of corruption could exist in covert programs, either corporate or government, but it does. And that is very disappointing and very heartbreaking, but also scary. And I coined the term disclosure PTSD. But a lot of these guys I've been dealing with for the last year, they have a type of post-traumatic stress disorder from learning all this, because now they know it's true. Because I've been giving them enough information and get inside places, and inside skiffs, and inside bases, and so your whole world flips upside down. I was talking to someone late last night about 2 a.m. about this, because it just, your whole paradigm is shaken, and that's hard. I mean, if you're a conventional politician or bureaucrat or whatever, or president even, that is just shocking to the system. So we also have to be patient about the process.
Right. Well, some of these ones who are being more vocal, that they want, that they know they're not being told, they know they're not being allowed to have the information, and they're becoming more vocal. Have any of them reached back out to you to ask any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will provide everything I can. The only thing, for example, if I'm working with very senior people who are sensitive, don't want to be identified to someone who's not their immediate chairman of a committee or whatever, I'm not going to tell another congressman exactly who that is, but I'll talk about the process and what's going on. One of them, a lot of them think members of their own party are lying to them, when in reality, the senior people in that same party don't know anything. Because if you're, say, new to Congress, there's a congressman who's reached out, who's spoken publicly about this recently, Burchett from Tennessee, and he's rightly upset that this is secret and that there's anything classified about it. But I think many times those people will think, gee, there are people who are hiding this from me. Well, they can't hide what they don't know, right? So this is the hardest thing for people to get their minds around. I think in my 30 years doing this, understanding the nature of the secrecy, that it's so deep and so secret that everyone, if you asked 1,000 people on the street, do you think this person, the CI director, or this person, the chairman of a key oversight committee in the Senate, would be read into and know all this? Most people say, oh yeah, of course. They don't. And that, when I discovered that in 1993, that flipped my world upside down, honestly, because I went, what? This is through the looking glass. This cannot be. And so I'm very compassionate. I know what kind of, how upsetting that was to me, because it wasn't like, people sit on the computers and endless nonsense conspiracy theories. But when you're actually sitting there briefing a CI director or a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who, by the way, one of them I briefed was the senator for Nevada, where Nellis is, and Area 51, and he had never been told anything, and he was on the Intelligence Committee of the Senate back then, Brian. And I met with him at a secret room inside McCarran Airport in Las Vegas years ago, and he was just flat-footed. He said, "I can't." So this is. Everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time, and everyone have these sort of like grandiose ideas, and we have to understand that there are people who've been in the Congress and the White House who have deceived each other, but most of them know nothing. 99% probably know nothing. But the ones who do, they're there to deceive and to interrupt and stop progress. In other words, they're corrupt. I know who those are too. I won't talk about it. But
so this disclosure of all this, when you talk about PTSD disclosure, general public, some who follow you and follow this subject matter know a lot about this. I mean, they probably know more about some of the people on the Hill for sure.
yes.
The vast majority of people may not know about this, and to them this may sound like science fiction or conspiracy theory. I think this
Yeah.
may be hard for them, some of them, to really believe or wrap their heads around some of this. So what would you
And it is, and this is why, excuse me, the briefing materials have to be graduated. So, they're like in modules, or, step 1, step 2, step 5, step 20. You can't take someone from kindergarten who's adding 1 and 1 is 2 to calculus. It doesn't work. And so this is why I talk about this process having to be very well thought through, also compassionate, and with it structured so that you don't, if you try to go too far too fast, you leave them. They just go, this can't be. So it's a very hard thing for me to balance, because from where I sit, because I've lived with this for so much of my life now. I mean, I'm 67. I've been doing this for 33 years. It's half my biological life. I think that, I have to understand that someone just learning this, it doesn't matter what their rank and position is or scientific credentials. You have to understand that they have to be brought along. And frankly, the public's going to have to be brought along that way, which is why we started doing things like Unacknowledged and the Disclosure Project press conference and the books. Now, honestly, anyone who'd look at Unacknowledged, read the book, Unacknowledged, I guarantee you know more about this issue than any chairman of any committee in the US Congress or National Security Council staff.
Yeah.
That's true. But they're busy with a million other issues, right? You look at everything going on in the world, and they're pulled in 1,000 directions. And there's only so many hours in the day. And so you have to be able to put things in a very succinct way that makes the point. And most importantly, again, your whistleblowers who know, credible, prove who they were. They go in, and it's not coming from a retired doctor who's never been in the government. It's coming from the horse's mouth. Because all I can do is help set up the meat and advise and put this information together. But ultimately, the reason this whistleblower law is so important, they have the power, they have clearances, they were there. I know what I know from having I'd say over 1,000 people who've been involved with these projects that I've met with and discussed this with over the years. But that's secondhand. The firsthand knowledge, people who actually work the system, are in the system, were in the system, even if they were in the system 40 years ago. Very important. So we want them to come forward.
Right.
It's very important.
I know you've mentioned this before for the general public. And in something like this, even some of the people in the government who are trying to find information
Yeah.
would be using the same tools that the general public would be using, like the internet. And we've talked about this before, the black hole of disinformation. It is so easy to get diverted right into that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how do you caution people about this?
You inoculate them in advance. I tell them most of what you're going to encounter is some form of fantasy, disinformation, spin, half-truth, which is why this archive that has very specific information, documents, testimony of people who have come forward, etc., scientific information, that is going to be important for the public, for our leaders, and for policymakers. So it sort of needs to become the reference material. And by the way, anyone out there who's got material like that they want us to review, be part of this, please get hold of us, because Michael Schratt is working with me to create that vast Intelligence and Information Archive. And every month or so, we get another whole group of documents or information that we're getting through networking. So, don't assume that anything you have is unimportant. If it's a legitimate case, witness, government document, corporate document, all this is very, very important. And they're all being scanned in a word searchable PDF.
Right. You've said before that some people may think that their part of the story is a very small one, but you've tried to make this clear that, these are all little pieces of the puzzle.
Well, this is why I tell people, I started out having had contact, and I started out with, excuse me, a little bit of information, and then more, and another, and another, and another. It's like a million pieces of a puzzle that we're assembling. And each piece has come from this source, that source, what have you. Now, the hard part of this is really what's called intelligence analysis, which is really what my kind of specialty in this is. And that's connecting all those dots so you know where that puzzle piece fits. But just because someone has some little part of the puzzle, it may be something that then lights up a whole part of that picture. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. Very important. So people should not think we're not, it's very unlikely that someone at the very top of this organization, this covert organization, is going to come in with the holy grail of everything. The way we've assembled it so far is bit by bit by bit by bit by bit, painstakingly, which is 30 years of work. But that's why people should not undersell themselves, because whatever bit or experienced or saw, or this document or this information you had about this place, that I will be able to plug that in and go, that fills in this missing blank. See what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's really the hard work of this. It's not, you don't wave a magic wand and get this entire, because you're really pulling back layer after layer after layer after layer of the secrecy over 70 years of it.
Yeah, it goes back quite a way.
Oh, well, so World War II. Yeah. More than 70 years. So,
well, this is
it's exciting. We need help. So we need help with people building this internet site that would be the reference of all reference Bibles, as it were, for this issue. We need people to help fund these disclosure events in 2023. We need top secret and other corporate military witnesses to come forward. So put the word out. Thank you guys. I mean, Pat, you've done a great job helping get the word out, but we need everyone, take this YouTube interview. I'm out at my farm in Virginia, and just put it everywhere you can, link it everywhere. Everyone is listening. And we have almost 500,000 subscribers now on our YouTube channel, but we need that to be, 10 million or something in terms of the reach of this message, because now is the door opened. It's an opportunity we don't want to squander. It's a great opportunity. So I thank everyone for your help, and Pat, for your help.
Thank you. And they will put links in this at the bottom of this YouTube interview so people can follow the links.
Great. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Greer. Stay safe.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.